Welcome to Paranormal Nightshift, your home for everything that goes bump in the dark, where your fans-submitted stories come to life. Tonight's tale, titled The Loft, A True Encounter with the Unseen, comes from Kari. She thought she was a rational person. She thought the strange happenings could be explained away, until the night her reality was shattered. A basement loft, an unseen presence, and a single whispered growl in the dark. Some encounters leave a mark that never fades. Before we dive in, if you love eerie tales and the thrill of the unknown, head over to paranormalnightshift.com to grab your free copy of The Birth of Dimensional Desperado, the first book in the Dimensional Desperado series. Step into the past with Buck Shadow Sheriff Freeman as he unravels the truth behind haunted stories, one time jump at a time. Now, turn down the lights and let's begin. I consider myself a rational person. I've always been the type to brush things off, explain away the unexplainable, and chalk up anything weird to an overactive imagination or poor lighting. But after what happened in that basement loft, I can't deny what I experienced, what we experienced. And I'll never forget the fear I felt in those moments. My husband and I had just moved into the place, a basement loft in an old decrepit building. The building itself was old, really old. It had that unmistakable scent of aged wood and damp stone, the kind that seeped into your clothes and skin. The loft was spacious, with high ceilings and large, dusty windows that let in little light. My husband has always had a knack for attracting strange things, no matter where we lived, but something about this loft seemed to magnify it. He often talked about shadow people, these fleeting figures he'd see darting just out of sight. They were like dark, shapeless silhouettes, always just beyond the edge of vision. I always humored him, never dismissing it outright, but deep down, I thought it was just his imagination playing tricks. I'd see things too every now and then, a dark flash in the corner of my eye, objects going missing only to turn up in the strangest places. But I always rationalized it. Poor lighting, a cluttered mind, the usual suspects. Then came that night. We watched a horror movie in the back room, cozied on the couch. I can't recall the exact title, but it was one of those possession films. You know, the type where someone gets taken over by a demon and a priest comes to banish it. Our surround sound system was on, and the heavy bass speakers perched on top of our wall unit added to the atmosphere. And then it happened. As the priest in the movie shouted, "Get out in the name of Jesus Christ," one of the speakers launched off the shelf. Not a slow tip, not a gentle fall. It flew. A solid 10 feet across the room, landing with a loud, sickening thud. My heart leaped into my throat. My rational brain kicked in immediately. It must have been the sound, I told myself, forcing the words out as my heart hammered in my chest. The vibration from the bass, it must have shaken it loose. But my husband? He wasn't buying it. He just stared at me wide-eyed and shook his head. "Seriously?" he said, his voice filled with exasperation and a tinge of fear. "You're telling me that it didn't just fall, it flew, and you think it's because of the sound?" I didn't want to believe it. I couldn't. The idea that something else might have caused it was too much. So I yelled, telling him to just shut up about it and watch the damn movie. I needed normalcy, even if it was an illusion. Not even 10 minutes later, a knock echoed through the loft. We both froze. Here's the thing. Our loft was in the basement of this ancient building. The back door led to steep, creaky stairs that anyone coming down would absolutely make noise on. And the door? It is always locked. No one should have been able to get down there without us hearing. My husband looked at me with that "I told you so" expression, but this time there was no sarcasm behind it, just dread. "Go open it," I whispered, my voice trembling. He sighed, got up and walked to the door, muttering, "You know there's going to be no one there, right?" I desperately wanted him to be wrong. I needed to see a neighbor, a maintenance guy, anyone. He opened the door. Nothing. No one. My stomach dropped and a cold sweat broke out across my skin. The hallway beyond the door was empty, and the dim glow of the overhead light barely illuminated the stone steps leading up. There was no way someone could have knocked and disappeared that fast without us hearing them leave. "Told you," he said, his voice grim. That was it. I was officially freaked out. That night, I barely slept. I kept tossing and turning, my mind racing with every possible logical explanation I could come up with, none of which brought any comfort. And just when I started to drift off, the growl. It was low, guttural, and right next to me. I shot upright, my heart hammering against my ribs. I could feel my husband's arm around me, but I was too scared to move or look. Instead, I squeezed his arm. "You heard that, right?" I whispered. "Yeah," he said, his voice barely audible. "What was that?" It came from my side of the bed, the side where my feet usually touched the floor, the side where I now refused to move. We lay there frozen, straining our ears, waiting for it to happen again. But it didn't. Eventually, exhaustion overtook my fear, and I drifted off, although it was a restless sleep filled with uneasy dreams. When I woke up the following day, everything felt eerily normal. It was almost like the events of the night before were just a bad dream. But as I swung my legs over the side of the bed, dread gripped me. My feet hovered just above the floor as the memory of the growl came rushing back. I grabbed my phone, flipped on the flashlight, and scanned the floor. Nothing, just the cold wood beneath my feet. But that feeling stayed with me. It took me weeks to feel comfortable enough to walk around the loft at night without flipping every light on first. I found myself constantly looking over my shoulder, expecting to see something or someone lurking in the shadows. Thankfully, things settled down after that. No more flying speakers, knocks, or growls in the night. But I never quite shook the feeling that we weren't alone down there. To this day, I don't know what it was. Maybe it was something related to the building, something that followed my husband, or just something waiting for a way in. I still think about that speaker flying across the room, the knock at the door, and the growl by my bed. It may not be the scariest story, but the fear was all too real in those moments. With that being said, Kari, thank you so much for sharing your story. Now, if you have a story you'd like to submit, you can do so right here on Paranormal Nightshift. And hey, if you're enjoying the show and want to support what we do, consider joining us on Patreon. You'll get an ad-free experience, listen to new episodes a week early, and gain exclusive access to all future journeys of the Dimensional Desperado ebook series. Not into Patreon? No worries. You can also subscribe to the podcast on Spotify and YouTube. And while you're there, drop us a comment to let us know what you thought about this episode. And before you go, don't forget to grab your free copy of The Birth of Dimensional Desperado, the first ebook in the series. Just head over to paranormalnightshift.com and claim yours today. Thanks for listening, and until next time, keep your eyes open because the night shift never really ends.